First News with Keeler in the morning on WIBX and WIBX950.com.
You know who does an amazing version of this song?
Bob Dylan.
Driver's License. An amazing version. Ryan Nobles from CNN. You should hear him when he gets the guitar out.
What song did he do famously on your show?
What was it, Ryan?
Every rose has its thorn. Why do you guys
Every
always
rose.
forget that?
Every
That's
rose. Yeah.
You know
classic.
what? Until Ryan said that, I always thought it was every car has a horn. I never knew that it was every rose has its thorn.
I believe, or every gardener has a hose, I think is how it goes. Something like that. Ryan, good morning. Good morning.
I do all three of those songs. It's probably because I have children.
I think you're. I think you're right. I think you got to stay. It's important to try to stay somewhat relevant, or knowing relevance.
Right. Well, I'm also shamelessly a huge fan of pop music. So
Ryan, I hate to say this, but I am too. I like all. I like everything, and but I do get bored listening to old music. Like I already heard that. 1,000 times I've already heard that.
Right.
So that's me.
Yeah, I don't like everything. There's some pop music I can't stand, but a lot of I love The Weeknd. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So I love that song. So.
Well, I'm a fan as well. Okay. Kamala Harris, a big pop music fan. What do you think of that? Listen, you've been given all of this time. Everybody has been complaining. It started with conservatives. Why aren't you going to the border? Why aren't you going to go to the border? And finally, Lester Holt has given her a month to prepare for this. And the answer she gives is the answer she gave. I can't believe it.
I thought it was pretty stunning, too, especially because she's on a trip here where the entire purpose of this trip is to kind of burnish her credentials and show that she's on top of this issue, which is raging and is kind of the number one thing that conservative Republicans are hammering the Biden administration for. And then, the president, for good or for bad, put her in charge of it. Here she, I listen to House Republicans all day long. That's basically my full-time job.
Yep.
And the number one thing House Republicans have been saying over and over again for the past, 5 months is, why hasn't Kamala Harris gone to the border? I mean, her staff had to know that this was going to be a question that was going to come up. They had to have known to prepare her to answer that question with some sort of, a reasonable response. And she blew it. I don't think there's any other way to describe it.
And actually now you will see this in commercials.
Yeah.
No doubt.
It is I don't care what she accomplished on this trip to South America. The only thing that will be remembered over time is that answer.
Did she laugh too at the end? Is it like, I've never been to Europe?
Yeah, I think she did, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be in commercials.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I do think you're right. She, this was an important trip. She met with a lot of important leaders in that region. She even, which I think, you would expect conservatives to applaud, went to Guatemala and said that, and told the people of Guatemala to stay there, to not come to the United States, which drew a lot of criticism from progressives in the Democratic Party. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hammering her for saying that. So It's not as if she didn't take some kind of bold stances on this trip that you would think would at least somewhat satisfy the conservatives in Washington. But you're right, that single gaffe, which we've entered a phase. I don't know. I guess we've probably done that for a long time, where gaffe politics kind of rule the day.
Yeah,
and she has become the number one target of Republicans, particularly in the House. I see her name being brought up more in kind of a critical fashion than even Nancy Pelosi as of late. Probably because a lot of people think that she's going to be the Democratic nominee in 2024 because the president won't run for re-election. So she's become an easy target, and she gave them some easy material by just not being basically prepared to answer that question.
She's, I see her as someone who has the same type of, and I could be wrong, but I feel like she has the same type of vulnerability in terms of image that Hillary Clinton had.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest difference, though, between her and Hillary Clinton is that Clinton had so much of the baggage of her husband that was kind of hanging around her neck. To a certain extent, it's unfortunate for her because she carved out such an impressive resume of her own. She was United States Senator and Secretary of State. She'd done a lot of things on her own 2 feet, but she was always kind of mixed up in the Clinton era of his administration. And Harris doesn't have that. She came up on her own and has kind of her own background to lean on. But I do think that she, listen, Bill, I think the big kind of, and I'm sure there's going to be some people in your audience that roll their eyes when I say this, but the biggest comparison between Secretary Clinton and Kamala Harris is that they're both women. And I do think that, I think voters, I think the media, I think
women,
people in general give women a harder time, and they have a higher bar to cross in positions like this. And I think that Kamala Harris is facing that as well.
Ryan, I think women hold women to a higher standard. And
I think it's across the board. I think that, I think that, basic things, that Kamala Harris had to deal with that male politicians probably don't have to deal with on a trip like this. What is she wearing? What's her husband doing while she's gone? Things like that. These are questions that we wouldn't ask of a male politician in a situation like that. I don't think that has anything to do, let me be clear, about the way she answered that question. The basic questions about how she's handling this border crisis. But I do think, when you draw her into the same comparison with Hillary Clinton, the most obvious one is that they may be the two most successful female politicians of our generation, and that's why they're always going to be connected in some way.
Yeah.
I've never thought when it came to Hillary either, like what's her husband going to do while she's on this trip or something like that. I'm not saying people don't think that way. I'm just saying that's not a thought that's ever crossed my mind.
Do you not think that women are it's tougher for a woman to be a tough politician than it is for a man because they're judged differently than men are judged? Because I really believe that's true. And it's not just with Democratic women; it's with women, Republicans and Democrats. And it's almost as if Ryan, it's as they gain. You watch the demonization of Stefanik. You watch how that progresses over the course of the next year.
Yeah, I do. I think that's I think about all of the female politicians that I cover, and I think about the way that they're described by their detractors. And there are negative, characterizations of these female politicians that we would never apply to a male politician.
Right.
I've never heard a male politician described as shrill. I've never heard a male politician described as too mean or aggressive or all these things or the B word, for instance.
Right.
Never heard a male politician assign that kind of language. And
but what do we say about Cuomo? We say Cuomo's an A word. We don't call him the B word. We call him the A word, right?
Yeah.
Or I have.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but I think a woman can be that too. I feel like a woman has to worry about being too crass. Because if a woman is too crass, she's automatically disliked. Where if a man is too crass or too tough, we're like, yeah, he really gave it to him. I do think there's a different. We look at it differently.
On the other side of that is if they're not tough enough, they're
right.
With men, there's an expectation that a man will be tough, that a man will come into the room. That's part of Donald Trump's success, his bravado, that he's not afraid to tell people what he really thinks. And for women, it's, if we automatically assume that a woman is not going to be as tough in any given situation.
I want to give you the perfect, and move on from this, but I want to give you the perfect example. You're going to walk away, you're going to use this. I think you might even use this example on CNN. All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
Imagine if a woman, and let's say it's Kamala Harris, cried every time something emotional came up like John Boehner did.
Right.
Look how John Boehner was judged, and you tell me how the woman would be judged.
And probably laughed out of politics.
Absolutely right. It would be a career ending because she'd be too weak to be able to handle the job.
I can only think of one time in Hillary Clinton's entire long and illustrious career in politics where she cried. It was right before the New Hampshire primary when she was running against Obama, and people still talk about that.
Yeah.
It only happened one time in public. So, yeah,
all right.
You're right. You're 100% right.
Is it all, infrastructure all over?
No, in fact, I spent last night camped out in front of a small room in the bowels of the Capitol where a new group of bipartisan senators are trying to hatch some sort of a deal. The big difference between this deal and the deal before was where you only had one Republican dealing directly with the president. Now you've got a group of Democrats and Republicans, moderates that are trying to find some sort of common ground. It's a group of 20 of them. If they can come up with a deal that they can agree with and that they can get leadership buy-in in, I think there's a chance the White House comes along. I still think there's pretty huge obstacles that they have to overcome. I think the big question now, Bill, is if this group, the G20 group, if they're able to come up with a deal, I think the next question is, does the White House lose Democratic support for it? Is it not going to be enough for progressives? And it won't so much be a problem in the Senate, but it'll become a problem in the House where the margins are so tight there. I think House Republicans are probably not going to vote for anything that has Biden's stamp on it. And if you lose 5 or 6 progressive Democrats, that might be a real big deal. So they are, I would say that it's still kind of a long shot, but the deal's not done. It's just gone in a completely different direction that surprised a lot of us yesterday.
All right. Interesting stuff. Mets still in first place, by the way, and a tough loss last night. We'll see if they bounce back today. I understand.
Too, I was so excited they took 2 of, they split the series with the Padres.
That was
That's
big.
A very good team.
Yep.
But then to get crushed by Baltimore.
Yeah.
Terrible.
San Diego
that shows us that the AL East is a lot better than the National League.
San Diego, by the way, back in they're in New York this weekend, so that's going to be an interesting series to watch. All right, Ryan Nobles, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
I can't wait for the John Boehner comparison. I can't wait for that.
Yeah. Keep watching.
I'll keep watching. I won't hold my breath, but I'll keep watching.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, Ryan Nobles from CNN. Do you vehemently disagree with it, or
no?
I just think women are treated differently.
I think it depends on. I do think it depends on the person. Almost like a beauty is in the eye of the beholder type thing.
We're at a place, by the way, where all management is female here.
Correct,
and very well respected.
And maybe that's why sometimes I don't make that connection. I don't know, but yeah, I know women do get a more critical eye. But there are many reasons why people get. I guess the critical eye. The John Boehner example, I think, is a good one. Although, was Boehner known as a crier?
Yes.
Throughout his career?
Well,
or until he became the House Speaker?
No, I don't. I think he was in the spotlight when he was Speaker of the House. So it was just like, oh, my God, he's crying again. You could see the lower lip start to quiver a little bit. It's like, there he goes again.
Yeah.
Boehner's crying again.